May and Hollis's dining room had always been a place of comfort. The brick colonial in Upper Arlington smelled of roasted chicken and garlic, the kind of meal my mother swore would speed her recovery after surgery. Hollis fussed with the carving knife while May, her knee still stiff, stayed anchored at the head of the table. My cousin Lark snapped photos in the background, catching the chatter and the blur of hands passing green beans. Elias squeezed my hand under the table, a quiet anchor in a house that carried both history and fault lines. For the first half hour, everything felt almost ordinary. Hollis teased me about Buckeyes football stats. May kept urging seconds, and laughter lifted the weight of the past few weeks. I thought maybe, for once, dinner would be just dinner. Then Cormac pushed back his chair. The scrape on the hardwood sliced through the conversation. He was standing, tall and deliberate, eyes fixed on me. "You stole my wallet," he said, his voice sharp enough to silence the room. At first I thought he was joking. The room stilled. Forks paused in midair, before I could even form words. He bent toward the canvas tote resting by my chair, plunged his hand inside, and pulled out his black leather wallet like a magician with a trick. He held it high, triumphant, as though the performance itself proved the crime. Gasps circled the table. Hollis froze with the carving knife. May's lips parted, but no sound came out. I felt every gaze pressing on me, the sting of suspicion before I'd even spoken. "I didn't take anything," I said, the words catching in my throat. But Cormac only sneered, shaking the wallet as though it were a gavel. My cheeks burned, my stomach lurched. And then, against all sense, laughter spilled out of me sharp, incredulous, unstoppable, because even in that moment of humiliation, I saw it clearly the tote wasn't mine. It was May's, and she hadn't moved from her seat all evening, and that was when the absurdity of his game finally began to reveal itself. The laughter that slipped out of me at the table wasn't just about the tote or the wallet. It was years of cracks widening all at once, fault lines that had been there since childhood, but no one ever wanted to see. Growing up in Columbus, Cormac and I lived under the same roof but in different worlds. He was the firstborn, the boy with the easy smile and quick wit. Teachers excused his missed homework because he could charm them into believing he'd make it up. Relatives praised his confidence at reunions, calling him a natural leader. Meanwhile, I was the one with notebooks lined in perfect rows, careful handwriting, and report cards taped to the fridge not because anyone asked, but because I thought it might earn me the same applause. May stretched herself thin on double shifts at the school, grading essays by lamplight after cooking us dinner. Hollis patched up neighbors' cars in the garage for extra cash. There was little room for indulgence, yet Cormac always seemed to find his way into new sneakers or the latest video game. If I asked, the answer was, "We'll see. Maybe later." If he asked, somehow later arrived sooner. I don't think my parents meant to play favorites, but survival leaves little space for fairness. Hollis admired Cormac's boldness. May worried he'd collapse without encouragement. I filled the gaps by being dependable, the one who kept her head down and stayed out of trouble. As we grew older, those roles hardened. I built a steady life college, a job as a forensic accountant downtown, a partner who respected me. Cormac chased ventures that sounded grand but never stuck a bar in the short north, a landscaping company that folded before winter, a tech startup that was mostly borrowed money and talk. Each time, he emerged with another story, and each time, May and Hollis clapped for the effort, not the outcome. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was strong enough to carry my own validation, but the truth was, resentment lived in me too, quieter but sharper, like a splinter you can't dig out. And now, as Cormac's voice echoed across our parents' dining room, I realized those splinters had been waiting for this exact moment to pierce the surface. A week before the dinner, May called me into the living room while Hollis dozed in his recliner. Her knee was propped on a cushion, A stack of papers spread across the coffee table. The afternoon light through the curtains made the ink on those forms look heavier than it was. "I need you to help me with this," she said, tapping the top page. Durable power of attorney, healthcare directives, and a note about the Clintonville rental. After the surgery, I kept thinking, what if something happened and no one knew what to do? I don't want confusion. I want things to be clear. Her voice was steady, but I heard the undercurrent of worry. She wanted me to sit with her at the attorney's office, to walk through the details, to make sure nothing slipped past. It made sense. Numbers were my life. Documents didn't intimidate me. I can do that. I told her, whatever you need. What I didn't realize then was that Cormac had been listening from the hallway. He stepped in with his easy grin, but his eyes were too sharp, darting from the papers to me. "What's all this about?" he asked, picking up a folder like it was a menu. May gently took it back, saying she just wanted things organized. He didn't press further in front of her, but I knew that look. The one that said he felt something slipping out of his hands. Cormac carried debt like a shadow. Store cards, payday loans disguised as short-term bridges, ventures that swallowed more than they returned. I had pieced it together from conversations overheard, collectors' numbers flashing on his phone, the sudden urgency when he asked to borrow from May and Hollis. If I became the one in charge of financial paperwork, his leeway would shrink to nothing. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the way he'd stared at me across the living room, the calculation behind his smile. He wasn't just annoyed, he was cornered, and a cornered Cormac was always dangerous. By the time the dinner rolled around, I should have known he wouldn't let the evening pass without a performance. The evening began with gestures so small, no one thought to question them. May settled at the head of the table, her canvas tote hooked neatly on the back of her chair, the one she always brought with her. She hadn't been moving much since the surgery, and everyone tried to make her comfortable. Cormac was the first to hover, fussing with the chair like he was some kind of caretaker. "Let me adjust this leg," he said, crouching down, his hands brushing the floor and then the bag strap. May smiled, grateful, and none of us thought twice. Later, when I sat down beside her, Cormac drifted over again. He leaned close, claiming he wanted to check the wobble on my chair too. His cologne lingered long after he moved away. He made a joke under his breath, something about me being the human calculator who couldn't survive if a chair leg collapsed unevenly. It landed poorly, but he laughed at his own wit. Hollis cut him off with a proud mention of my work downtown, how the company trusted me to keep their books clean. For a second, I caught the flicker in Cormac's eyes, something sharp beneath his smile. Elias reached for my hand under the table, grounding me, while Cormac kept flitting from one person to another, pouring water, cracking jokes, playing the attentive son. He was weaving himself into the night like thread, never still, always visible. In the background, Lark was snapping away on her phone. She'd taken to photographing everything at family gatherings. Not posed shots, but candid frames. The little moments, she said, told the truth better than any portrait. No one minded. It was just Lark, her camera an extension of her presence. By the time Hollis carved the chicken and May passed the green beans, the room was warm with routine. We laughed about Buckeye football, traded memories of May's peach cobbler, teased Elias about still learning the family's inside jokes. Nothing about the evening seemed unusual, nothing to make us wary. But looking back, I can see it the way Cormac's movements weren't kindness, but calculation. Every step rehearsed to set the stage for what came next. The scrape of Cormac's chair against the hardwood was so sudden it sliced through the rhythm of dinner. A moment earlier, Hollis had been telling one of his familiar garage stories. May had laughed softly at his punchline, and Elias had just reached for the breadbasket. Then silence swallowed everything except the groan of the chair legs and the heavy thud of Cormac rising. "You stole my wallet," he said. The words fell sharp, rehearsed. His eyes locked on me with a certainty that made the entire table pause. Before I could answer, he moved with a kind of performance, bending toward the canvas tote that hung from the back of May's chair. His hand slipped inside, fingers groping for only a second before pulling free a black leather wallet. He raised it high as though it were a trophy, his face lit with false triumph. "See? It was right here." The sound that followed was not one gasp, but a dozen small ones overlapping May's fork clattering against porcelain, Hollis's knife resting mid-carve, Lark's camera lowering with a snap of instinct. My cheeks burned under the collective weight of every gaze. Elias's hand twitched beside mine, but I didn't take it. My eyes were fixed on the tote, my mind running faster than my pulse. It wasn't my bag. May had carried it in herself, struggling with her cane in one hand and the strap in the other. I'd even offered to help, but she insisted she could manage. From the moment she sat down, that tote hadn't shifted an inch. Her knee was too stiff, her body too still. She hadn't touched it since. The absurdity of it all hit me then, not just the accusation, but the sheer arrogance of thinking it would stick. A laugh burst out of me, sharp and uncontained. It startled even me, but once it began, I couldn't pull it back. It wasn't cruel. It was clarity breaking through panic like sunlight. "Interesting," I said finally, my voice calmer than I expected. "Tell me, Cormac, when exactly did I bring a tote to this dinner, or when did May stand and move hers?" The words landed like stones on still water, rippling outward. Cormac's smirk faltered, just for a breath. Hollis's eyes narrowed, tracing the logic. May touched the tote instinctively, her hand trembling against the canvas. Elias leaned forward, the air around him charged, ready, and in that fragile pause, I felt the first thread of his story begin to slip loose, the weave unraveling with every breath that followed. The room teetered in that strange space between shock and belief, everyone waiting for me to stumble. Instead, I leaned back, steadied myself, and turned toward Lark. Her phone was already in her hand, half hidden under the table like it always was. "Lark," I said quietly, "you've been snapping all evening. Can you check the clips, the live ones?" She blinked, startled, then nodded. Her thumb moved fast across the screen, scrolling through bursts of Candid's Hollis carving, May smiling, Elias passing the rolls. Then she stopped, eyes widening. "Play it," I told her. She tapped, and the few seconds of motion filled the silence. There was Cormac, crouched low near May's chair under the pretense of fixing it, his hand dipping into the tote, sliding something dark inside before standing up with that same bright smile he wore so easily. The air changed. Hollis's mouth tightened, his eyes narrowing with recognition. "That explains it," he muttered, more to himself than anyone. "Last week, a 20 disappeared from my garage wallet. I thought I'd misplaced it." May's hand trembled against the tote strap. "He asked to carry this for me earlier, said it looked heavy," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't think, but I thought. I thought of every borrowed dollar never repaid, every charm-wrapped excuse, every time the family smoothed over his missteps because calling them out felt like disloyalty. Now the logic locked into place so neatly it was undeniable I hadn't brought a bag. May hadn't moved. The only one who touched that tote was Cormac. He shifted in his seat, jaw working, eyes darting around the table for someone, anyone, to come to his defense. None did. Elias reached across, his hand steady on mine, grounding me in the storm of revelation. The clip replayed in my head even as Lark lowered the phone, her face pale. The truth spread across the room like ink spilled on linen, impossible to blot out. Conversations died mid-breath, Chairs creaked, but no one spoke. In that silence, I felt the weight shift. Cormac had thrown his accusation like a stone, but it was already rolling back toward him. Cormac finally broke the silence with a laugh that was too sharp, too brittle. "So what if I moved a wallet? You've all been dying to believe she's the saint and I'm the screw-up. Congratulations. You got your proof." His eyes locked on mine, and the grin slipped. "You think you're better because you sit in some office with spreadsheets. You've been angling for control ever since May mentioned those documents. Durable power of attorney, transfer deeds, health directives. You'd love to have everything running through you." I felt May flinch, her hand closing tighter around the tote. Hollis set down his knife with a heavy clink. Cormac kept going, his voice rising. "If she's the one in charge, then what's left for me? Nothing. Just the brother who couldn't measure up. And don't pretend you didn't know if she gets those papers signed. Every mistake I've ever made will be written in ink." Hollis's face sagged with something between shame and fatigue. "I co-signed one of his loans years ago," he admitted quietly. "Thought it was a chance for him to stand on his own. It went bad. I've been carrying the weight since." May drew in a breath, her voice steadier than I expected. "That's exactly why the papers need to be signed. We can't afford more chaos, but there will be safeguards this time. No one will carry debts that don't belong to them." Cormac's bravado slipped, his shoulders sinking. For a flicker, the mask cracked no arrogance, just a man exposed. He opened his mouth, but no excuses came. Only silence stretched between us, heavy as the truth that finally lay bare. I sat back, watching him crumble under the weight of it, and I knew the next step would change not just dinner, but the shape of our family itself. Hollis was the first to speak, his voice low but steady. "This ends tonight. No more hidden debts. No more pretending. You'll repay what you owe. Cormac, every dollar, even if it takes years. But you'll never again have access to our accounts." May nodded, her hand on the tote like a seal of finality. "And the documents will be signed. Rowena will be our primary for health decisions. Financial powers will be overseen with safeguards. We need stability, not charm." Cormac's face tightened, a flash of anger sparking in his eyes, but the usual smooth words didn't come. His mouth opened, then shut again, like he was searching for a script he hadn't prepared. I leaned forward, keeping my voice calm. "I've never wanted to replace you, Cormac. I only wanted honesty. I love my brother, but I can't carry your lies anymore. They're too heavy, and they were never mine to bear." He recoiled as if the words were a blow, his pride stinging more than any accusation. The room held its breath. Then, with a violent scrape of wood on floor, he pushed back his chair and stood. "You'll regret this," he muttered, though the conviction in his voice was already fading. He grabbed his jacket, the wallet clutched tight, and stormed toward the door. The slam echoed through the house, rattling the glasses on the sideboard. For a moment, no one moved. Then May exhaled, her shoulders sagging as if she'd set down a burden she'd carried for years. Hollis rubbed his forehead, the lines of worry cut deeper. But there was relief, too. Elias's hand found mine under the table, steady as ever. The air felt different without Cormac in the room lighter, if only for a breath. And in that breath, I knew the ground beneath our family had shifted for good. Weeks passed before the tension in my chest loosened. May spent her mornings at Riverside Methodist, learning to climb stairs again with a therapist at her side, her determination as steady as the nurse guiding her. I visited between work meetings, sometimes catching Hollis in the waiting room with his crossword, his quiet presence a reminder that even storms leave room for ordinary life. In the evenings, I walked the Scioto Mile, the river cutting through downtown like a dark ribbon. The skyline glittered against the water, and for the first time in months, I could breathe without bracing for the next crisis. The paperwork was complete, every document signed, notarized, and filed with neutral oversight. No hidden hands, no whispered promises. Transparency became the new language of our family, and it felt cleaner than anything we'd known before. Cormac's name still lit up my phone now and then. At first, his messages dripped with defensiveness, blaming me, calling me self-righteous. Then they softened into half-hearted apologies, followed by silence. I didn't block him. I let the space remain, firm in my boundary but unwilling to close the door forever. Love, I realized, could coexist with distance. Sundays became lighter. Around the old table in Upper Arlington, May passed stew bowls with a smile. Hollis cracked jokes about his crossword failures, and Lark's camera clicked as naturally as her laugh. Elias leaned in beside me, his arm brushing mine. Both of us part of something steadier than before. The absence of Cormac's voice, sharp and restless, was noticeable, but it left room for other voices to grow louder, ones that carried warmth instead of accusation. As the meal ended, I felt the weight of what we'd survived settle into something else entirely, not inheritance in the form of property or money, but in the dignity of choosing clarity over illusion. It was a legacy built not on what was left to us, but on what we finally refused to carry.